Good morning. What a great room. And what a special atmosphere, right? Shall we give it up for the room? It gives me great pleasure on behalf of Iceland to welcome you all to Iceland, to this very important Reykjavik Global Forum. I hope we'll make good use of it. We certainly need to. And it is such an honor for me, as Ragga mentioned before. I have always been so proud of the fact that we were first to democratically elect a woman as president. This was a huge role model for me. She was elected when I was 11 years old, and that was back in 1980, so now you can calculate my age. And 10 years later, this wonderful woman was voted for president in Ireland. And she has said to me, since we became good friends many years ago, and we've been up to good trouble around the world for many years now, and we're planning on making some good trouble here this morning and get you all going. She has been a role model to me as well. And she said to me that she might not have run for president if it hadn't been for the role model that President Vigdís was 10 years earlier. So imagine the power of being a role model. And I am so grateful for having had the two of them and feel like I stand on their shoulders and also feel like I'm here to lend my shoulders, and I know I can speak on behalf of Mary as well. We are here to lend our shoulders and speak authentically and openly about why we need more women leaders. And that will be the focus on our session, but we also want more men who dare to lead like women. So it's also for you men. Right, that's what we need to think about. But Mary, over to you. I'm so glad you made the time to come here and join us for this important event. And we are at sort of an unprecedented moment in history for humanity, so many challenges. And you did share that Vigdís had an impact on you running, and you served for 7 years as President of Ireland. Tell us a little bit about why that mattered to you, and then maybe paint for us where are we now in the world, and why is it so important that we have more women leaders and more men who dare to lead more like women?
Well, it's very true that Vigdís did have a big impact and helped me a lot, because it's hard to be it if you can't see it. You know, and she was the only woman president in Europe. When I was nominated, I was 100 to 1 against, according to the Irish bookmakers. They were actually polite. They meant 1,000 to 1 against, no chance, because the Deputy Prime Minister was going to be the candidate of the major party that always got the presidency. It was all very sure. And Vigdís helped me because I could see that she was proud to be a woman as president, and I was determined, like her, if I got elected, I was going to show that actually I felt more able to be a really good president because I was a woman, because I could bring all the strengths of being a woman to it. And if it hadn't been for her example, it would have been harder. And I do remember that. And you know, looking around and seeing, you know, the sort of diversity and the inclusiveness here. You know, a lot of us are only meeting for the first time, but you know, we have something very rare and very important together that we should recognize. Funnily enough, interestingly enough, we have trust. We trust each other, don't we? We feel it. We don't need to know a lot about each other. We're here because we want to have a leadership that will make a difference for others. That's something we have in common. And that's quite rare. There is a lack of trust in the world at the moment because too much of the leadership is about the man leading for himself and not actually being a servant leader, if you like, to make a difference for people. So I think we need to know our power, grow our power, and be able, by recognizing our strengths, one of them being this extraordinary trust in the women's movement. And it's a trust that crosses all the barriers because we know instinctively that the reason that we're here, the reason that we care, is because we really want to change the world for the better for others. That, you know, that we tackle the misogyny, that we tackle the fact that climate affects more women, that we tackle the inequalities that affect women and girls more severely. And we want to do it for all people. We care about boys and men as well. Yes, Vigdís was a great help to me.
I can't help but to raise a question that was just asked of us backstage when you raised this, because the numbers show that women, when they get to power, they typically stay in the positions of power for less time than men. You decided to leave, to not run again after your 7 years term. We've seen other examples around the world of women leaders who don't run again or choose to leave politics altogether or business stage or sort of the leadership stage. Talk to me a little bit about why that is. What drives the fact that women don't overstay their welcome?
Well, I'd also like to hear you on this, Halla, but in my case, you know, I was extraordinarily dedicated to opening up the presidency, showing that a directly elected president can work at all of the levels, the very local level, the community level, and I was with you in the community that's affected by the earthquake, and I saw a great community, and I saw the way you related to that community, that's one, and then at the national level, and then at the international level, and it was a very exciting 7 years. I was lucky, like you, to have a very supportive husband who said from the very beginning, we'll work hard, but let's enjoy it, and we did. But I knew, regretfully, because I really loved being president, that it was time to hand over to somebody else to build on what I'd been doing. And that was my motivation. I think the motivation of a number of leaders, Jacinda Ardern, for example, was she just couldn't take the misogyny, the social media, relentless, crushing effect that it was having on her. And, you know, she had a young child, and, you know, and I think too many women are being affected by that now, just the threats and the misogyny. But I'd also like to hear your view.
I think there's a good reason for why women may sort of know their time. And I think that reason is that women share power. They do power differently. They think about power through others and not just through themselves. And they usually, I believe, offer themselves up for leadership to drive impact. It's not about their ego or themselves. It's because they care about the state of the world. So I think that's sort of the good side. I think the sad side, you just touched upon it, Mary. It is more difficult still for women to be in leadership positions. I think the social media environment has made it more difficult, the media environment in general. I can say in the 3 months that I've served in my role, I've sometimes had more news about what I wear than what I say.
Absolutely.
I think we have to move beyond that kind of packaging conversations about women and truly start to listen to the way they bring difference to bear. And I am concerned that we have many examples of great women leaders around the world who have actually openly shared that this part of the role is why they're no longer wanting to lead. And I just worry that that means we'll get leaders who don't care about anything but themselves and won't get the good leaders that we need.
And this has led the elders, and actually I was introduced as chair of the elders. That's another example of a woman stepping down from the chair. I'm still going to be a very active elder, but I tried last year to say to my fellow elders, look, I've done it for 5 years, I love being chair, but for good governance, don't we need another chair? No, stay. And then I said, well, I'll stay for 1 more year. And we planned, therefore, during the year that I would transition, as I did last month. So I'm back to being an active elder, which is a great honor. And the new chair is Juan Manuel Santos, the former president of Colombia, who got the Nobel Prize for bringing peace with the FARC. He's brilliant on peace and also peace with nature. So he's a very strong, good new. And why did we do that? Because of good governance. So you're right. It's not a case of hanging on to power for the sake of it. It's knowing that we're self-regulated. So we don't set the standards of governance. You know, they won't be set.
And just to explain, because maybe not everyone knows the elders, but the elders is a group of former national leaders who have come together to drive positive impact in the world. And Mary was the chair of this organization until just recently, where she believed in transition of power.
Yes, we were brought together by Nelson Mandela in 2007. And we had people like Jimmy Carter, who's still an elder emeritus, we call it, a retired elder, and Guru Brundtland, Marty Ahtisaari, who died not too long ago, and presidents from different, but not always presidents, and also my deputies when I was chair were Graça Machel and Ban Ki-moon. Ban Ki-moon was my boss for 3 mandates, and then he became my deputy, and he loved the fact that the elders were chaired by a woman. You know, he felt very strong. He kept saying, as our chair, Mary Robinson, you know, he really wanted to make a very big statement about that. But the elders have thought about the points you're making about leadership, and particularly the fact that leadership is very short-term, very, more and more populist, instant solutions to complex problems. So we've actually put forward very seriously the idea of long view leadership. And it's not rocket science, actually. The world is complex. We have existential threats like the climate and nature crisis, the nuclear weapons crisis, the pandemic crisis, which we still haven't got over, the inequality in our world as a crisis in itself. And we need, collaboration and compromise. We need to reach these solutions, but we need to reach them based on science and reason, not the sort of awful negation of truth and conspiracy theories and misrepresentation of facts and denial, etc., that's going on. So that's the first thing. We need to be compassionate in that leadership because people are affected differently by decisions that are taken at the global level. They impact differently, and we need to have a real thought for those who are most affected, most vulnerable. And we have done a lot of dialoguing and talking in an intergenerational way, and we love doing that. And we started with young climate activists because they were but now we do it with on all of our issues. During UNGA this September in New York, the UN General Assembly, the elders, there were 8 of us there actually, and we took part in quite a few of the summit discussions, the Summit of the Future, and we noted that the Pact for the Future, as I hope young people in the audience, I know I've met some of our young participants, I hope they've noted that the Pact for the Future for the first time really has hooks for young people to be at the decision table, to be cared, that their way of thinking will influence how we go forward. And so we learned. And Kofi Annan, who was, Archbishop Tutu was our first chair. Kofi Annan took over, and then I became the chair. So Kofi Annan, who had been my boss when I was High Commissioner for Human Rights, was chair for 6 years. And he would say quite often, and it's a good saying, you are never too young to lead, and you are never too old to learn. So actually, as elders, even though we had thought through this long view leadership, we modified it because of the interaction we'd been having intergenerationally. And we now say long view leadership and co-creation with different generations. And we don't just mean political leadership, we mean the widest leadership. And that's why I come back to the importance of women's leadership in that context. So speak to that, Halla.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, it's interesting to me that we are coming up on a very important year next year, 2025. 10 years on from the Paris Agreement, 10 years since we came up with a global business plan called the Global Goals. That we're both wearing here today. 30 years since Beijing, the conference where we talked about women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, Hillary's famous quote. And 50 years since Icelandic women took the day off and showed Iceland and eventually the world that nothing works when women are not at work. So I think it's an important year, 2025, and I have myself been thinking hard, and I'd like to put that out to all of you here as you talk to each other over the next couple of days. What do we make of that year? Because we've had such backlash on many fronts in the world, and I know some people feel loss of hope in the face of backlashes in women's rights, human rights, in democratic rights, and the fact that we're at war in so many places, in the fact that we don't seem to be able to deal with our existential challenges like climate, nature, inequality. because we're just so divided on every issue that we're not having conversations, and the fact that trust is so low almost everywhere. So I think you raised an important part. So one of the things that Mary and I thought we would put out to this room is, what should 2025 be about? How do we come together in a different way and start to close what I sometimes talk about? I guess I'm an old technology person because I sometimes talk about the 3G gaps, but it's the gender gap. And to me, that's not just about inspiring and empowering women and girls, because I'm equally concerned about boys and men right now who clearly feel lost in a world and are looking for a sense of belonging. Loneliness has been growing for many groups in society, and this is leading to them trying to find their tribe somewhere, and that tribe that they seem to find is not necessarily the tribe that wants the best for humanity for the long term, as you mentioned. So I think thinking about the gender gap with a more broader lens than we've been thinking about it is important. I think the second gap I think a lot about is the generational gap, and you and I have been doing a lot of bridge building between generations, and it changes everything when generations come together.
Yeah.
I've seen hardcore financial profit for the short-term CEOs open their hearts like in no other place, like when they are with their own daughters, for example. That's been a powerful key to change in my previous roles. And then I think the third gap is the global gaps, because I think so many of the conversations we're having, they've been had from the Western perspective alone. And I think the global South, the global East, and the global West need to find ways to come together in a very different way. So I think if we could try to bring people together across these gaps more powerfully in not just conversation, but actually co-creation. And the third kind of, or the fourth, just moving up on the technology spectrum, if I go to 4G, the fourth G I could talk about is how we can bring different groups of stakeholders together. Because I don't believe we can solve any of these grand challenges only with government, or only with business, or only with civil society. I actually think we need all stakeholder groups at the table. So I don't know if we can, Mary, maybe here as we come towards the end of our time, sort of call on this group, because leadership isn't something that resides only in those who get to serve as president for however short or long amount of a time. It sits in each and every one of us. So how do we show up at a time where humanity really needs us to? Can we think boldly about what next year is about?
Well, let me give an example which will explain why we're both wearing this lovely symbol of the dandelion. An example of women's leadership. We realized that the climate and nature crisis is a very urgent one. The science is clear. We're not on course for the safe world. But at the same time, we're on the cusp of a much better world. We're literally on the cusp of it. We're moving, but we're not moving fast enough. We are moving with new technology, with the fact that solar is cheaper. China and India are moving much more rapidly in the right direction, though still using too much coal, and the rest of the world, Europe. But we're not fulfilling the goals that we've set ourselves and are implementing. So we decided that women need to step up, women leaders. And we looked for a symbol, and I'm a great believer in symbols. We know that churches use symbols all the time, and they're right. People need something to unite. I put a light in the window of my official residence when I was, I said I would do it on the night of the election, and we put it there for all of those who'd had to emigrate from Ireland because of conflict or poverty or sexual orientation. Catholic Ireland in the 80s was a very sad place with a lot of emigration, and that light took on a light of its own and created an Irish diaspora sense, and we got much better policies as a result. So what is the dandelion? Many of us think of it as a weed, but I now think of it, as you do, as a beautiful flower. It grows on all continents. It's very resilient. You can't get rid of it if you want to. But it also has these deep roots that regenerate the soil. You could eat or drink every part of the dandelion, no waste. And it's nature. It reminds us we're nature. And how do you spread it? You blow. The children blow the seeds. Now, we already see the difference Project Dandelion has made in the women's climate movement. We see it in the preparations for Baku. We're all far more together now than we were before Project Dandelion. People are doing what they're doing with their own networks, with their own focus, but we know that we're also connected. We need to widen that connection. We need to link with indigenous peoples who've always saved the forests and saved the seas. Young people, especially young climate activists, local communities, entrepreneurs, business, philanthropy, farmers, fishers, artists, very much, filmmakers, because we have a very powerful lobby on the other side, the fossil fuel lobby. It's going to be very present in Baku. There are going to be all these lobbyists who are going to use Baku to make profit. It's appalling. So we have to be smart about growing our power through visibly connecting in the way that Project Dandelion is leading on. Now, Project Dandelion is one of a number of different ways in which we can do this, and I think this is what we should talk about. How do we connect more? How do we have radical connection, radical communication, and radical collaboration? Now, you run with that, Halla.
I love that, and particularly the radical. I remember, and I actually think women of Iceland came up with radical, shared, collective, courageous leadership back in 1975 when they did take the day off and showed that nothing works when we don't show up. I think we need something else now, but I think there are lessons that can be learned, that leadership is no longer an individual act. It's a shared collective activity, and it must be. So maybe I'll end, because many of you said to me that I had the opportunity to meet yesterday that you feel discouraged by some of the things that are happening in the world. And I don't blame you. I think we can all wake up on any day now and find reasons to lose hope. But without hope, there is no energy to move us forward. So we need to hold on to hope. And I think that hope is something that we hold more easily together. I sometimes say that courage is a team sport. To be courageous is easier when you belong to a community of some sort. And that makes me think, because
we're stronger together.
We're stronger together, exactly. It's the theme. And I want to just end by referencing a young poet who inspired me a few years back, and her final words in her famous poem. Her name is Amanda Gorman, and many of you will know her, were basically, "For there is always light, if only you're brave enough to see it, if only you're brave enough to be it." So be the light and use this opportunity, women and men, to build bridges, to think about hope and courage, and how coming together can actually help us deliver the world we want and need, because there is no time like now to get going with action. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we dance again. Where's the music?